She was 14. Braids in her hair, basket on her bicycle. Nazi soldiers waved her through checkpoints without a second glance. Hidden beneath newspapers in that basket was a loaded pistol she'd used to execute German officers before the day ended. The weapon wasn't the only thing they missed. Her sister Truus, 16, rode beside her. Two communist girls from a broken home in Harlem, pedaling past armed guards who saw children where assassins actually sat. The Nazis built their occupation on assumptions about who posed a threat. Freddie Oversteegen would make them pay for every single one. But here's what the resistance commander didn't tell them when he knocked on their door in 1941. He said they'd get military training, learn to march, maybe distribute pamphlets. He didn't mention the list of names. He didn't explain what liquidation meant. And he definitely didn't warn them about the moment Freddie would shoot a man, watch him fall, and feel the sudden horrible urge to help him up. That detail would haunt the Oversteegen sisters for 75 years. The Nazi's body jerking as the bullet hit. The way he looked almost surprised. And Freddie's hands, still small enough that people thought she was 12, tightening on the handlebars of her bicycle as she rode away. This is the story of how 3 teenage girls turned seduction into a weapon, how bicycles became instruments of death, and how the Netherlands learned that its most effective killers wore braids and looked too young to buy a drink. By the time you finish this, you'll understand why Freddie Oversteegen would tell an interviewer 70 years later, "It never suits anybody unless they are real criminals." She was talking about murder. She'd committed it dozens of times. May 1940. The Nazis invaded the Netherlands and the Dutch surrendered in 5 days. Freddie was 14, living in a cramped apartment in Harlem with her mother Trintje, sister Truus, and a Jewish couple they'd hidden in their home. Their mother was a communist who'd walked away from their father years before. The morning after the invasion, Freddie watched from her bicycle as German soldiers grabbed a man off the street, shoved him against a wall, and shot him. No trial. No warning. Just gunfire echoing off brick and the man crumpling to the pavement. She was forced to watch. Freddie felt anger harden into something colder. Her sister Truus saw worse. An SS soldier grabbed a baby from its mother's arms and smashed its head against a wall. The father and sister screamed, hysterical, helpless. The child died instantly. Truus would later say that watching that murder justified everything that came after. Every bullet. Every body. Their mother handed them anti-Nazi leaflets the same week. They glued warnings over propaganda posters, rode their bicycles through the city, pasting messages, distributing communist literature, moving fast before the Gestapo caught them. If they'd been caught, they'd have been executed. But they looked like schoolgirls. Nobody stopped them. That's when Franz van der Wiel knocked on their door. He commanded the Harlem Council of Resistance and wanted to recruit the Oversteegen girls. He looked at their mother and asked if her daughters could join the underground fight. Trintje agreed on one condition. "Always stay human," she told them, no matter what they were asked to do. Van der Wiel promised military training. Truus was 16. Freddie was 14, but with her hair in braids, she could pass for 12. That's exactly what Van der Wiel wanted. They started with sabotage. The girls learned to rig bridges with dynamite, to cut railroad tracks, to move through occupied territory without attracting attention. They dressed younger than they were, pigtails swinging, pedaling bicycles loaded with forged papers, weapons, and explosives hidden under newspapers and vegetables. German soldiers waved them through checkpoints. 2 little girls on bikes. Harmless. They burned a Nazi warehouse. They smuggled Jewish children to safe houses, handed out false papers while Allied bombs dropped overhead. They blew up railway lines to disrupt troop movements. And then Van der Wiel told them about the other mission. The one that required a different kind of courage. Some targets couldn't be sabotaged. They had to be eliminated. The Germans had collaborators. Dutch citizens who turned in Jewish families for money, who arrested resistance members, who kept lists of names for the Gestapo. 35 guilders for a 4-year-old Jewish child. That was the going rate. Van der Wiel had names. He needed the girls to handle it. Their first missions involved a third woman. Hannie Schaft, 19 years old, red hair, studying to become a human rights lawyer before the Nazis kicked her out of university for refusing to sign a loyalty oath. The 3 became a team. Hannie was the intellectual. Truus was decisive, the natural leader. Freddie mapped out routes, planned logistics, and played the role that made Nazi officers drop their guard. She was the youngest, the prettiest, the one who looked most innocent. The strategy was simple. Truus or Freddie would walk into a bar where Nazi officers gathered. They'd smile, make eye contact, start a conversation. Flirtation came easily when you were 16 and pretty and the officer had been drinking. Eventually the talk would shift. A suggestion. A walk in the woods. Some privacy. The Nazi would agree, thinking he'd gotten lucky. He'd follow Truus into the forest, expecting a kiss. What he got was a bullet. A resistance member waited in the trees. The grave was already dug. The Nazi fell into it. Truus and Freddie rode away on their bicycles before anyone noticed he was missing. But then the missions evolved. Truus and Freddie started working alone. No male resistance members. Just the two sisters and their bicycles. Sometimes Freddie would be the lookout while Truus made contact. Other times they'd follow an officer home, wait until he was alone, and ambush him in the street. And sometimes, this was the method that became their signature. Truus would pedal the bicycle while Freddie balanced on the back, pistol in hand, and as they rode past a Nazi officer on the sidewalk, Freddie would shoot him. Twice if necessary. Then Truus would pedal harder, turning corners, disappearing into crowds before the body hit the ground. Freddie was the first of the three girls to kill a German soldier this way. Riding a bicycle, pistol extended, squeezing the trigger as the wind whipped her braids behind her. She told an interviewer decades later about the strange feeling that followed. She'd shoot a man, watch him collapse, and then feel this bizarre compulsion to go help him up. Her brain couldn't reconcile what her hands had done. "We did not feel it suited us," Truus said years later. "It never suits anybody unless they are real criminals." But they kept doing it. Because the alternative was watching more babies get smashed against walls. More families turned in for pocket change. More Jews loaded onto trains. The work left marks they couldn't see yet. Freddie would cope later by getting married, having babies, trying to build a normal life. Truus would pour her trauma into art, sculpting memorials. But during the war, they didn't have time for reflection. They had names on a list and bicycles that needed to keep moving. The resistance gave them another mission. A senior Nazi officer had children. The plan was to kidnap them, use them as bargaining chips to free captured resistance members. If negotiations failed, they'd have to kill the children. Freddie, Truus, and Hanny refused. This was the line they wouldn't cross. "We are no Hitlerites," Freddie told the commander. "Resistance fighters don't murder children." Van der Wiel accepted their decision. The mission was scrapped. But other missions continued. By 1944, the trio had become legendary in resistance circles. They'd blown up bridges, smuggled dozens of Jewish children to safety, eliminated countless Nazi soldiers and Dutch collaborators. They operated in plain sight, young women on bicycles, weapons hidden in baskets, death riding on handlebars. The Nazis never adapted. They kept seeing girls where assassins were. April 1945. 3 weeks before the war ended. Hanny Schaft was transporting underground papers and a pistol on her bicycle when German soldiers stopped her at a checkpoint. Someone had seen her during an attempted assassination. The Nazis knew about the girl with the red hair. They'd been hunting her for months. She dyed her hair black to hide, but at the checkpoint, the roots gave her away. They arrested her, interrogated her, tortured her for information. She gave them nothing. On April 17, 1945, they took her to the dunes outside Haarlem to execute her. 2 soldiers aimed their rifles. The first shot missed. Hanny, bleeding and defiant, looked at her executioner and said, "I'm a better shot." The second bullet killed her. Freddie and Truus didn't know for days. When they found out, something broke inside them. They'd survived together, fought together, killed together. And now Hanny was gone, executed by men who'd never seen her as a threat until it was too late. 3 weeks later, the war ended. Freddie was 19. Truus was 21. They'd spent their teenage years killing Nazis, smuggling children, blowing up bridges, and riding bicycles through a country that didn't recognize what they'd sacrificed. The Dutch government didn't honor them. Their communist politics made them suspect. For decades, they lived in obscurity. Freddie married, had 3 children, tried to forget. Truus made art and eventually wrote a memoir, but the recognition didn't come. Not for 69 years. In 2014, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte awarded Freddie and Truus the Mobilization War Cross. They were 88 and 90 years old. But the recognition came with a cost. Journalists asked questions. How many did you kill? Did you feel guilty? What was it like? Freddie never gave a number. Neither did Truus. "I'm not a murderer," Freddie would insist. It was a necessity. But the nightmares never stopped. The insomnia persisted for 75 years. The moment after pulling the trigger, the man falling, her instinct to help him, played on repeat in her mind. Truus died in 2016, age 92. Freddie died on September 5, 2018, one day before her 93rd birthday. Both women lived long enough to see streets named after them, to hear their story told, to know that history wouldn't forget what they'd done. But they also lived long enough to understand the cost. You must always remain human, their mother had told them in 1941. They tried. They killed to protect the innocent, refused to murder children, drew lines they wouldn't cross. But they still shot men in the streets. They still watched bodies fall. They still rode away on bicycles, braids swinging, baskets loaded with weapons, leaving corpses behind them. The Nazis never saw them coming because they looked at teenage girls and saw weakness where strength actually lived. It was the last mistake dozens of them ever made. But Freddie and Truus weren't the only women who used youth as a weapon. In Warsaw, another teenager was turning her age into an advantage that would save 2,500 Jewish children from certain death. Her name was Irina Sendler, and her story proves that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones nobody takes seriously.